Afternoon, everyone. I am Jonathan Duin from the United Nations Environment Program, where we are hosting the Global Alliance for Buildings and Construction. And I would like to welcome you to our webinar, Buildings and the NDCs, where we will talk about the practical guidance for policymakers and practitioners that will support the revision of the NDCs in 2025. So this is an important moment, as you know, that the countries are engaging, most of them still in preparing their NDC that they will have to submit to the UNFCCC. So it's an important year in terms of the national commitments from countries under the Paris Agreement. And the buildings and construction sector is a key sector, and where we want to see more ambition, more investments, more action, and more inclusion. The webinar is organized by the Global Alliance for Buildings and Construction, that I hope most of you already know, and the program on energy efficiency in buildings, who actually started at the same time as the Global Alliance, and that I do hope also many of you already know, and in partnership with our partner, the World Building Council. I'm not going to mention much about the GlobalABC, but as you know, the GlobalABC is a platform that was started at COP21, trying to bring all the stakeholders together around the table to push towards a zero emission and resilient buildings and construction sector, and really to try to see how we can align with the Paris Agreement and achieve the Paris Agreement and bring the contribution in a sense that the building sector can make to achieve the Paris Agreement. And the program in energy efficiency in buildings is a global partnership that currently works with 21 countries and which is also supporting towards energy efficient and resilient buildings. It brings together the financing, capacity building, and technical advice, but also, of course, there's some of the knowledge sharing, and in that context also closely works with the GlobalABC. It's a multi-donor partnership financed by France and Germany, the European Union, and the Green Climate Fund. So this webinar is important. As you know, as I mentioned, we are now entering into the moment where the countries are revising their NDCs. And in 2023, the Program on Energy Efficiency in Buildings, PEEB, did a complete comprehensive mapping of where the NDCs stand in terms of how buildings is actually taken into account. And the mapping found that actually a big majority of the countries, 168 countries on 194, have actually integrated buildings or have buildings-related target in their NDC. So about 87% of the countries currently already have a target in their NDCs around buildings. So there is a clear recognition that buildings are important. But also what we realized is that, the targets are still not strong enough to actually guide the implementation. And therefore, we need more ambitious goals in terms of GHG reductions. I mean, only 80% of the NDCs currently list some quantitative GHG reduction targets for the building sector. And then we need more comprehensive measures that look at the full life cycle of buildings. As you know, we are pushing for a whole life carbon approach to buildings, and not only look at a lot of energy efficiency measures that have been put forward by many countries, but actually not really looking at the whole part of the embodied carbon and the materials also that are a key element to reduce the emissions from the sector. As you know, actually the emissions from embodied carbon will probably grow over the coming years and be closer to 50% of the total emissions of the sector going forward. Also noting that only 16% of the NDC are specifying currently the financing needs for the building measures. So there's really a need also to strengthen the part of the finance and define clear strategies on how the implementation is taking forward of the priorities that are put in the NDCs. And then, of course, buildings are an important element for people, and it's important to think about the questions related to inclusion and equality, equity, because, of course, often when we look at the buildings, a lot of work is being done with fancy office buildings or hotels, but what we really need to tackle is the residential sector. And in many countries, as you know, there's still a challenge with having adequate housing for the people. So the challenge is pretty important in the sector because, of course, it's a very fragmented sector, as you know, and that's also one of the reasons that the GlobalABC was created, trying to bring everyone together. And because of the fragmentation, it makes it pretty hard for the policymakers to actually develop comprehensive and effective intervention strategies. So it's really important that the different stakeholders work closely with the government to make sure that the actions are well comprehensive, aligned, and bring on board all the actors that need to be there for the implementation. So we felt that we actually developed a paper together with the Program on Energy Efficiency in Buildings, GlobalABC and PEEB, which we will present today because we wanted to make sure that we can provide more guidance and learning for the countries on how policymakers can actually deliver climate impact on buildings and how they can integrate it in their NDCs. So when we say climate action, of course, we are not only talking about mitigation. And as I said earlier, we are pushing for near zero or net zero buildings, but at the same time also resilient buildings. So adaptation is absolutely critical. But we also want to ensure safe homes and affordability for the spaces where the people live. So it's with this ambition that we developed our new publication, the NDCs for Buildings, Ambitious, Investible, Actionable, Inclusive. That was developed jointly, as I mentioned, by the GlobalABC and the PEEB. And the aim is really to see how we can support the policymakers now with our, I would say, members and stakeholders in developing the NDCs to show a clear path towards implementation that can actually deliver the impacts that the building sector can bring and the contribution that the building sector can bring to achieving the goals of the Paris Agreement or the NDCs of the countries. For that, the authors have developed a set of practical tools which provide 5 simple steps, and those will be elaborated later in the presentation by the lead author of the publication, and a comprehensive menu of different policy options that, of course, needs to adapt it to the local context, and proposing a realistic approach for increasing the ambition. The development of these tools was, of course, based on some of the preliminary research and work that we've been doing, but also a consultation with a number of the key actors leading the buildings transformation, and integrates the wealth of their experience to show that for all contexts, there is a path for concrete action starting now. So bringing experts from countries together to share their experience to discuss during this webinar. I think we have many excellent experts around the table here today who will support us with their experience and share also how they are supporting or looking at supporting the way forward for increased, stronger NDCs actions and targets in the NDCs for the building sector. So we want to make this webinar for you, the participants, and there will be the opportunity for you to raise questions. So please make sure you ask any questions that you want to put forward to the panel and the speakers today. And let's make sure that we use the time that is left to come up with great NDCs. I mean, this is really the year now. I know, there's an expectation to get these NDCs in quite quickly, but I also know that a number of countries are just starting the journey to prepare their NDCs. So it's really the moment now to make sure we support those countries so that we can drive climate action in the building sector through the NDCs. I will now hand over to Anna, who will be your moderator. So Anna, please, over to you.
Great. Thanks a lot, Jonathan. Thanks a lot for setting us up. I think that really painted the picture where we want to go. And I was really happy to see, I think we have like 70 people in the call now. So very warm welcome to all of you. It's great to hear. I had a peek, like some people that we know, also many people that we don't know. And as Jonathan said, I think we want a very interactive webinar. And for that, I'm very happy to say, we have a lot to discuss, and we're very excited to have really an excellent panel of speakers with us here today. I think you can see the pictures. You'll see them in a second. So we have Kenichi Kitamura from UNFCCC. Then we have Xavier Reddy. She's the author of the NDC guide. We have Audrey Nugent from the World Green Building Council, who will introduce the scorecard to us. We have Kennedy Matheka from, he's the National Coordinator for Buildings and Climate at the Kenyan Ministry of Lands, Public Works, Housing and Urban Development. Asmari Ashrafi, she's a senior planner at the Ministry of Housing and Public Works in Bangladesh. And we have Danduma Waniko. He is the president of the Green Building Council Nigeria. And we have Ashok Bonham. He's regional project coordinator of the Asia Low Carbon Buildings Transition Project at the GGGI. So wonderful panel. Very happy to have you. And I mean, just so this works really well, a few housekeeping rules for us today. So yeah, first of all, I think we're going to record this session. So to have the possibility to also show it to many others that won't be able to join today. So just be aware, you can ask questions anonymously in the chat, but yeah, just be aware. And I think you know the trick. We have 90 minutes, so I think that's a really good time. We'll have a mix of presentations and a panel discussion. And by all means, please ask questions. So we have 2 times in the webinar, you can ask questions in the chat. We'll monitor it, we'll pick it up, and it would be great to hear from you. Yeah, so I think all the participants will be muted. I think our speaker is unmuted. And with that, I think we can dive right into our agenda. So what can you expect? I think we have a nice packed agenda. I mean, first of all, Kenichi Kitamura from the UNFCCC will set us up. We'll explain a bit the framework where we stand, what needs to happen this year still, maybe also some of the challenges that we need to address. Then we have Shravya. She's the author of the NDC guide with her team. And so she will really kind of like lay out all the advice and findings from that guide, and she will also be able to answer your questions. Then we have Audrey coming in. She will introduce the scorecard that the World Green Building Council with the Green Building Councils is developing. So also a very interesting tool. And then we have our distinguished panel. And I think we'll go around the room, but we'll have time for your questions as well. So without much further ado, I can now hand over to Kenichi Kitamura from the UNFCCC to basically explain to us the framework and what to expect in 2025. Kenichi, floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Anna. And Jonathan has already clearly highlighted many aspects I wanted to mention, but as building is a major contributor to the climate change by generating huge greenhouse gas emissions, and also building a shelter to protect people from the negative aspect of the climate change. And this is recognized in our process, UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, we call UNFCCC at COP. For example, last year, Anna and Jonathan and also colleagues from World Green Building Council participated in one of the flagship events where governments around the world discuss the challenges and the opportunity to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from buildings. And we all know the current progress to limit the temperature increase is not ideal, and the state of integration of buildings into the NDC is one of the case in point. As Jonathan mentioned, that the current status of integration of building in NDCs are somewhat limited. So our team prepared a synthesis report for all NDCs, which will be updated every year. And let me share comparison with other sectors. For example, more than 90% of the NDC mentioned energy supply measure to reduce emissions, most commonly renewable energy deployment. It also around 60% mentioned some kind of ecosystem restoration, protection, afforestation, and reforestation, while other policy areas such as electric vehicle is mentioned by 40%. And similarly, when it comes to buildings, many measures are related to energy efficient electric appliances And the other elements of building decarbonization are somewhat less frequently mentioned, such as on-site renewable energy deployment and energy efficiency improvement of buildings. And I believe this has been also highlighted by the newly launched GlobalABC's guidance book. And this stage has something to do with key barriers needs to be overcome. And this is also highlighted by Jonathan. And from my perspective, the fragmentation is the key barrier. Fragmentation, I mean, the coordination among ministry is always a huge challenge across different policy areas, but building has a far more larger stakeholders, including local governments to do with the building permit and a lot of small scale construction companies and business, and also an individual who owns and rent the building as a household. And also technically, there's some fragmentation of how to measure emissions and how to evaluate the reduction of emissions by specific measures. So these fragmentation poses a challenge to further integrate building into the NDCs and more broadly reducing emissions and increase resilience against climate change. So lastly, I'd like to highlight the importance of a new round of NDC, which is due this year. And NDC is a key opportunity, as most of you are already recognized, to mobilize political will and resources. And this is a unique process because it happens every 5 years, at least, at the global scale. And the collective progress of this NDC, particularly mitigation targets this year, will give us the best estimate to what extent we can reduce or we can limit the temperature increase. And currently, it's likely to going to around 3 degrees, but let's see to what extent we can bend the curve of global greenhouse emissions and also limit temperature increase. So today, I understand panelists and audience, everybody are interested in how to integrate buildings into NDCs. And I want to emphasize that because of the challenges of fragmentation, the role of coordination and the leadership, like you who today joined these webinars and colleagues from PEEB, GlobalABC, World Green Building Councils are really important. We need someone to coordinate all of the policy efforts and technical expertise, knowledge, and many fragmented stakeholders to reduce greenhouse emissions and more to facilitate more integration of building into NDCs. And with that, let me hand over back to Anna. Thank you. It's a pleasure to join this webinar. Over to you, Anna. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Kenichi. I think that was really great in kind of like setting us up in terms of what's the frame. And I mean, we all know, I think there's a lot of like, not much time left and a lot of urgency this year. But I think that really helped to point to the key aspects of like, how to overcome the fragmentation and really, come up with something that really fits well in the country context and that helps us avoid that 3-degree scenario. Super. So I think with that, I'm very happy to hand over to Shravya Reddy. And I don't see her yet.
I'm here, Anna. Hi.
Yeah, wonderful. Okay, great to see you. So Shravya and her team, they had the formidable task, I would say, to look into kind of move away from like what we know about the NDCs as they stand now, the NDCs on building, and like ask yourself the question, so what would be needed actually to move to kind of the next level, to really think about how to overcome this fragmentation, what's different best practices that countries have already explored, and kind of show different ways of how you can tackle it. And I think now this is like It's not the end of the discussion probably, but it's really an important tool for the discussion. And I'm very happy to have you present the findings of the report. And we have, let's say, 20 minutes for your presentation. And then we also want to have some time for your questions. So please, everyone, I think you'll have a lot of questions as we go through the presentation. Put them in the chat, we'll monitor that, and then we have a bit of time for back and forth and kind of digging deeper into everything we want to know from you. Great. Shravya, with that, floor is yours, and we're very curious to hear your presentation.
Thank you so much, Anna, and thank you to everyone who's here today. Really, really encouraged by seeing such a large attendance. It is, a test to the level of interest in the global climate change community and the global buildings community about NDCs and strengthening NDCs. And as we've heard from the previous speaker, 2025, it's a critical time to revise and update and strengthen our NDCs, and in this case with a particular focus on the building sector. So let's dive right into thinking about how best one can do that. I do want to say that the work that we did to support GlobalABC, UNEP, GIZ, it was myself in partnership with Dr. Saket Saraf, who is based out of India, and he is actually attending today as an attendee as well. So just to thank you from my side to Dr. Saket Saraf and our other colleague, Ruchi Kapoor, who is also a contributing co-author, and she is now with KPMG. So just to say, it was a big team effort, and of course, a lot of guidance and a lot of direction from UNEP and GIZ so has gone into this process, as well as a number of expert interviews and stakeholder engagement. So all of that we've managed to kind of put together in this sort of step-by-step guide that we will now walk you through. Next, please. I'm not going to spend too much time on this slide. I think just to say that the guide exists. It's a resource for everyone here and others you may wish to share it with. And it's meant to be a very simple step-by-step guidance. Every country, of course, spends a lot of time working towards its NDC revisions. There's a lot of analytical work that goes into it, a lot of background research and technical work that goes into it. Nevertheless, I think the years that one is sitting down to do the revisions, there's often, in some cases, a sense of, well, what do we put in this NDC? Where does it go from here? How do we evolve it? Of all the possible options out there, the universe of possible measures that one can conceive of, how do we prioritize? How do we, construct that final NDC? And this guide is meant to kind of help navigate those questions. And that's what's in this guide, and I'm going to walk you through a part of that. Next, please. There's, of course, a lot more in the guide than what we can cover in today's session, but it's going to give you a sort of a taste for what's in there. One of the key things that this guide is underscoring is that any NDC section on buildings and construction, I mean, this is true of all the NDC as a whole, but in this case, we're talking about the NDC component on buildings and construction. In 2025, this revision has to ensure that this content is ambitious, investible, actionable, and inclusive. So we want everyone from this webinar to, go home and take this away, that as you get into the work of developing or contributing to this year's revision of the NDC, make sure that when you're finished with it, you're able to look at it and say, yes, we have made sure that this one is ambitious, investible, actionable, and inclusive. What does this really mean? We'll talk a little bit more about it, but essentially ambition means higher impact goals, both in terms of mitigation and adaptation, and acceleration, and acceleration of climate action. We know all too well that climate action has been too slow, and we are far behind the Paris Agreement 1.5, and perhaps even the 2-degree target is a little bit, getting out of reach. So we need to act faster. And of course, to increase the breadth of the measures that we're taking. So a lot of NDCs, they focus on one or two subsectors. There'll be a few measures on energy efficiency, for instance, but not on other elements like construction or circularity. So we're saying that ambition means better targets, more stronger targets, a faster pace of activity, but also broaden what the scope of what's in your NDC for buildings and construction. Investable, and this is key. A lot of NDCs in the first generation just submitted the policy measures or identified kind of the areas of action, but did not actually transform these NDC measures into financeable, investable activities. And so what we're saying is part and parcel of the NDC development process is that one must think of these measures with climate finance eligibility in mind. They shouldn't merely be measures that the building sector needs from a development point of view. They need to be climate-driven measures so that they're eligible for climate finance. And of course, in order to make that finance flow, they should be well costed. There should be financial strategies underpinning the NDC. There should be an NDC financing roadmap, for instance. And yes, one must think about how to harness both public and private sources as we think of these measures. Third, the NDC content must be actionable. Again, some of the flaws we've seen in past NDC generations is that the actions are articulated and it provides a sort of vision of where the country wants to go, but the NDC is not accompanied in any way with direction on implementation arrangements. Who's going to do this? Who are they going to work with? By when is this going to get done? How are we going to track this? And without these types of enabling measures, the commitment itself will remain just that, and there's no way to actually affect it. And we want that to change. And finally, inclusive, the fourth and also equally important hallmark, because all too often we find that NDC measures are developed by a few experts, technocrats, or practitioners, consultants, who of course naturally bring that domain expertise to the process. However, what's missing in all of that is wider stakeholder engagement to really involve everybody from the beginning to the end of the buildings and construction value chain, people who reside in buildings, people who construct buildings, people who operate buildings, people who supply materials, everybody, so that these diverse needs are reflected and met, but also you're creating this sense of ownership and buy-in so that you're involving all these different actors in the implementation process once the NDC is adopted. Next, please. There are 5 steps that we've said will help get to this end result of these 4 hallmarks. Could there have been 15 steps? Could there have been 9 steps? Yes, but we have tried very hard to kind of simplify things here. Every country will follow its own process, and there will be a sort of a country-driven approach naturally. But for those who are really trying to kind of get a starting point of, oh, okay, what should we do? Just as a sort of primer, here's what we're suggesting can be done. So step 1, take a step back and start with thinking about the country's circumstances. So when one is thinking about the building and construction content in the NDC, what policy measures should be in there, what commitment should be in there, the starting point should really be a sense of, well, what's needed in this sector, and where does this sector fit in terms of the country's overall kind of climate profile. So we're saying this is a critical evidence gathering step. And this is a step where we need to do important assessments, whether that's a climate change inventory, greenhouse gas accounting, to understand how big a contributor of the country's emissions is the building sector. And within the buildings and construction sector, which components, which subsectors are actually responsible for the greatest share of emissions? Is it cement? Is it steel? Is it energy use? And so really identifying where those emissions are coming from will help better target them with the right measures. Similarly, on the adaptation side, one needs to understand what are the risks that the buildings and construction sector faces, and where are the biggest vulnerabilities, and maybe those are the vulnerabilities that would be prioritized in terms of the resilience measures. So this step really involves thinking, well, what is the balance of climate change mitigation and adaptation measures that are important for our country, the country that is developing that NDC? And of course, this is not a binary question. every country should include both mitigation and adaptation measures for this sector. In the past, there's been quite a heavy focus on mitigation because this sector is a heavy energy user. But increasingly, we're seeing the consequences of climate change play out, and the building sector is important both to, in terms of adaptation, both to preserve the value and performance of these assets, but also for this sector to actually help in broader societal resilience. So this is all to say step one should be about thinking, well, what are my country's priorities for this sector, both in terms of mitigation and adaptation? And let's figure out kind of where our balance of time, energy, attention, and resources should be. And one has to figure this out based on assessments. And that also includes technology and capacity assessments to understand, what one actually has the ability to deliver. But yes, we can now move to the next step. I think I've elaborated already on that step. Step two is no, let's just stay in step two. Thank you. Step two is, well, step one was what are the country's priorities, right? Step two is now informed by that sense of balance. What are the various typologies or categories of measures that would now start to be relevant based on the country's priorities? So if we've decided, for instance, that mitigation is mitigation should receive, say, the lion's share of attention in the building and construction NDC content, and then that should really be quite dominant in the commitments, then one starts thinking of, well, what types of measures really drive mitigation in this sector, building energy codes, building retrofits, renewable energy. If one thinks, well, we really need to enhance adaptation a little bit more, urban planning for adaptation and resilience, but also I think to some degree, renewable energy, constructions, methods, and processes. So again, at no point in this guide are we saying that some of these types or categories of measures are only applicable to some countries and not to others. All countries may find themselves keen to pursue all of these measures, but this is simply a sort of guide to inform some prioritization, because again, every country cannot do everything. Resources are limited. So in light of those limited resources, where can one invest one's attention? And we're saying that once you've accomplished in step one a sense of the country's climate priorities, and also not just mitigation and adaptation, but within mitigation, you've understood where some of the emission reductions need to come from. Within adaptation, you've identified where some of the big vulnerabilities are. Then you sort of take the step and say, well, broadly, there are 8 types of measures that we must at least consider. And this is a sort of bare minimum kind of list. Again, the question is, could we have categorized these measures in 15 categories, in 12 categories, in 5 categories? Yes. I mean, throughout the work we did, I think one of the biggest questions was, how do we group or cluster measures in the buildings and construction sector in ways that are meaningful? And the truth is, we ended up with 8. Each of you might look at the same list and end up with 12 or 15, but that's less critical. What's critical here is to say that of the range of measures possible, we found that they kind of neatly fall into several categories. And some categories will perhaps be bigger priorities for your country based on the assessments done in step one. And therefore, if time and energy and analytical resources are limited, gravitate towards those categories that emerge as more relevant to your country. Next, please. And I'm going to go through those 8.
Just
yes?
one, really sorry. I mean, just like with a view to the time, because we have a full program. I mean, just to keep an eye on the time, just a friendly reminder.
So step 3 is to select an appropriate combination of sectoral measures or policy options to achieve the goals. So we've gone through step 1 and 2, and in step 2, we looked at those 8 categories. Now, each of those categories, in a sense, opens up to a menu of options. If this were, for instance, a sort of interactive tool, maybe in its future iteration, that's how you would proceed. You would first go through a page that says, what are your country context and needs and climate profile? Then it would say, based on that, here are the types of mitigation and adaptation actions you should consider. And then you'd click through, and then it would open up a sort of a menu, a drop-down menu of options that you say, okay, now that you've decided the category of building retrofits, energy codes, renewable energy, and urban planning are the most relevant for you. In these 4 categories, here's another suite of measures that you could consider. As we consider these measures, and we can go to the next slide, we have urged countries to think about their level of maturity. So you'll see here, there's columns on the right that say market maturity 1, 2, and 3. And a part of step 2, which I didn't mention at the time, was that when you're thinking about what types of measures are most relevant, we also want you to think about the country's maturity in this buildings and construction sector. Income levels are not necessarily always a good barometer of a country's capacity in this sector and how advanced they already are with the work they're doing on climate action in this sector. Income level is not a bad place to start, but essentially we thought, instead of grouping it as low income, middle income, high income countries, it might be more meaningful to say, let's make 3 categories where there's one country that's sort of just beginning its journey on climate action in the building sector. These are usually LDCs, small island developing states, countries without a lot of sophisticated technical capacity, who have to start with the fundamentals, like building energy codes, like voluntary codes, and then make them mandatory. Countries that haven't even thought so far about adaptation in the sector and have to start doing climate change vulnerability and risk assessments. But then there'll be another set of countries, and all of you are best placed to gauge which of these categories your country fits into. But there's other sets of countries that are farther along in their journey. They've done the fundamentals in the building sector. They've got the codes. They've even got the codes are mandatory. They've already started looking at some kind of construction and materials and circularity issues. But now it's a time to go to the next level of sophistication, thinking a little bit more about circularity, for instance, and integrated approaches to mitigation and adaptation. And then there's finally a third category of countries that are much more advanced, who really have already kind of achieved a lot of their previous mitigation and adaptation commitments. And for them, it's time to think about net zero commitments and really push that ambition a lot further. So again, just to say that there are multiple categories, 8 categories or types of measures we identified. And within each of those categories, we provided
You still here? Yeah. You still here? No. Okay, I think we do have a connection issue. Let's see. In the meantime, I mean, checking the chat, I think no questions so far. So, okay, Shravya, I think we see your mouse, but we don't hear or see you. Let's see. Okay. Yeah, we'll just wait one little minute. Yeah, and maybe just like in the meantime to say, because I think we were discussing quite a bit with the team working on this. So the idea is really, I mean, when you look, I mean, you have the link to the guide. You will see that it basically maps out kind of all the options.
I am back. We
That's
are
great.
In South Africa. We have load shedding sometimes, and our energy security is not as reliable as we'd like it to be. I do apologize. I'm back. Super. And in the interest of time, I will try and get us fairly quickly through the remaining steps. But
super. And Shravya, yeah, just I think with a view to the time, I think we're already a bit beyond kind of the time for the presentation. So I think if we can slowly wrap up and kind of like get to the main points, and I think then we can get to the next points, and I think then there will be still time for questions if they come later. Super.
Could we get to the slide that says step 4? But basically, step 3, when you look at the guide, will give you a menu of many options to start from. And by no means is that exhaustive. Your countries will have your own lists of what's most appropriate for your countries, but these are important starting points, and we want to make sure that these are not lost in the process. Next, please. I don't know if the slides are moving.
So we're on finance and incentives now.
Oh, sorry, at my side it has not moved. That's probably a function of okay. So I will just assume that we're on the same slide, because I think the slide that would be step 4. Step 4.
We need to go one back, I think. No, we're now on finance and incentives, and I think we would like to see slide 17.
Yes, unfortunately, because of, I guess, the nature of my connection, the slides are not moving on my side, but I have my slides up, so I'll just say what's on the slide. I apologize for this. Step 4 is to put in place the necessary enablers to translate the chosen measures into action. So step 3 was to actually choose the measures and select what the commitments are going to be. Step 4 is to say, well, simply articulating these is not going to get us anywhere. We have to put in place the implementation capability to actually make them happen. And then the next 4 slides are essentially examples of those enablers. There is a whole set of enabling actions for finance and incentives. The next slide is enablers for awareness and capacity building. The slide after that is enablers on inclusion, equity, and justice, and then enablers on enforcement and governance. And finally, the 5th enabler, digitization and MRV. And again, you'll see in the guide that we also understand that not every country can put in place all of these enablers, but the columns on the right that show market maturity levels 1, 2, 3 are a sort of indicator of which of these enablers might be the right starting point for your country. And of course, if you've already achieved that, then certainly move to the next level of maturity. The slide after that is step 5, which is a checklist. So once you've gone through this process and you've identified a set of policy measures, identified a set of enablers, and you've decided these are the commitments you're going to make on the buildings and construction sector in your NDC, again, here's a moment to say, well, we've got this combination of actions and enablers, but let's just make sure, did we actually achieve what we started out to achieve? Are these ambitious, investible, actionable, and inclusive? And I will not, in the interest of time, now go through those checklists. They are in the guide, but they're meant for you to come in at sort of the tail end of the process and just double check. Does our NDC content reflect some of these elements that are in these checklists? If so, then we are progressing towards that achievement of those 4 hallmarks: ambitious, investible, actionable, and inclusive. And you will see that in these checklists, we've presented, again, a combination of three types of things to double check. And those are quick wins, a sort of moderate level of effort, and transformative actions. So this is to say, yes, this guide does suggest that the content of your NDC would certainly reflect your country's needs and market maturity level, right, in this sector. But regardless of whether you're at an early stage or mid-stage or advanced stage of market maturity and how sophisticated your capabilities are in this sector, there's no reason for any country to not have a combination of quick wins, things you know for a fact you can and must achieve in this NDC period, moderate challenges to say, well, let's push ourselves and be a little bit more ambitious. Let's move this forward. Let's advance our ambition. And then some transformative changes to try and aim for, because no matter what your baseline is, there can be things that can be transformative for your country, and we are encouraging everybody to sort of have that level of ambition. Finally, the guide ends with a blueprint. Sometimes it's really helpful to see an actual structure to say, okay, we've got a lot of these ideas, but an NDC, we don't want the NDC to be 500 pages long. Yes, there'll be technical annexes and roadmaps, but the NDC section itself should be reader friendly. It should be clear to policymakers what needs to happen. It should be clear to those looking, from climate finance institutions, what these priorities are and how your country intends to make them happen. How can we present this in a way that is compelling and tells that story? So I am now on the slide that just says a kind of blueprint. We've provided some suggestions on how you can structure it, have a dedicated section about the buildings and construction sector. Often in the past, the sector gets subsumed under energy, but we want this to be called out separately. Have a sector overview with targets, have a baseline description, provide clear indication of progress made on the previous NDC, and then the next slide says highlight successes from your country. And yes, all of the work that's gone in from step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, these identification of new measures and policy options to now commit to in this 2025 NDC, we provided a tabular format for you to reflect those commitments, and the design of that format is intended to automatically help move you towards reflecting the actionable, the ambitious, investible, actionable, and inclusive elements. Simply by populating it in this structure, we feel that those drafting that NDC content will be forced to think about these 4 hallmarks, and this is a clear way to present it. I'm going to stop there. Sorry for the technical issues and the delays, but thank you so much for bearing with me. I appreciate it.
Great. Thank you very much, Shavia. Thanks for presenting this comprehensive work. And I think we can all see, it's very rich. It has different components, going from kind of basically a bit of an idea of where you could actually start asking to actually giving very concrete ideas for what you could put in, being very mindful of the fact that an NDC will look different in every country. No, so and I think this is the idea of the guide, that it really provides the tools to help that. Xavi, I have good and bad news for you. So the good news is that we have many questions in the chat now. The bad news is that we're behind schedule, so I think we need to move on now. But I would say, if you could already answer a few questions in the chat directly, and then we can see what we can pick up in the panel discussion. And then, because we're moving from one highlight to the next, so now it's time for Audrey to present a really interesting piece of work initiated by the World Green Building Council, the question of a scorecard for NDCs. And Audrey, I think also to you, 5 minutes. And we're
no worries. I'll
excited
take that
to hear
challenge.
your presentation.
Excellent. So thank you for having me. And I think really excited to build on what Travia has just presented, because I think the scorecard that we are developing at World GBC alongside the network of green building councils is really aiming to build on that excellent work and take that suite of policy measures to see how NDCs that are being submitted by governments are aligning against best practice policy measures. So just very quickly, a little bit about World GBC. We're a global network of over 75 green building councils working to position the built environment as a critical solution to climate change. Our 75 GBCs cover 60% of the world's building stock and 65% of global GDP. And the countries represented in our network account for 72% of emissions from the built environment and 60% of the world's population. So it's quite a unique global, regional, local action network. And with the insight and experience we have harnessing the fragmented value chain in our sector, we are working to align, partner, and scale so that we are building the right policy environments, the right financing environments, and the right social and cultural environments to deliver more resilient and sustainable built environments. And when it comes to building the right policy environments, we have developed this project, which is the Scorecard for Sustainable Buildings. And we're co-developing that with our GBCs and building on some of the excellent work that's already been done. For example, the work that Travi has just spoken to support the evaluation and strengthening of national level policy on the built environment. The GBCs involved in the project are Brazil, Colombia, Egypt, Nigeria, and the Philippines. And the idea is to work together with local stakeholders to identify what are the best practice policy measures that we think should be reflected in NDCs, and also how are those policy measures being integrated from NDCs into national policy frameworks so that we're actually seeing a thread through to implementation. And this forms part of our wider campaign that we are working on towards COP30 to be bold on buildings. So if you just go to the next slide. So basically what we're aiming to do with the scorecard is it's providing a summary of best practice policy measures that are ranked according to their impact. And like I said, really building on the work that Travia has just presented. So it's not reinventing what they've done, it's building on that to rank and understand what are the types of policy measures across many different categories should be in revised NDCs, and also how are they linking in, like I said, to those national policy frameworks, plans and regulations. So the idea is once we have developed the scorecard, it's in development at the moment, stakeholders will be able to assess and compare their country's NDCs against that suite of best practice policy measures, and then reveal where further action is necessary to increase ambition and effectiveness of NDCs and national policies. So they're closing that implementation gap and putting the sector on a trajectory for 1.5 degrees, and that we're really kind of seeing that commitment being put into practice. So what does that actually look like? So if you go to the next slide. We will be launching a digital tool in April. So here you can get a bit of a preview as to what it would look like. So we would invite all countries, stakeholders, NGOs, those working in the sector with an interest to register and on our website and log in and use this tool to do that analysis. And then the next slide, go in, yeah. Here you can see, and this is an example, and like I say, we're building on the excellent work that's already been done. So we spent a lot of time doing desk-based research on the best practice policy measures. We've worked quite closely with Travia, building on the work that has been done there, the work that PEEB have done, and then also surfacing the learnings that we're getting from local GBCs in those pilot countries about what are the best practice policy measures. And what we're doing now at the moment is working to identify what types of policy measures are the most impactful when it comes to climate and resilience, and do we need to be more regionally specific? So what we foresee us having once we have finalized this is, you can see here, according to different categories, the types of policy measures, and what we will be doing is analyzing, is that reflected in the NDC? Is it reflected then and integrated into national policy and regulatory frameworks? And then once you've done that analysis, what is the action that specific country may need to take to address perhaps the lack of ambition in the NDC, or perhaps reflect the fact that the NDC is ambitious, but it's not flowing through into the regulatory framework. So really giving an idea of where a country sits. So if you just go to the next slide, I'll very quickly share with you a timeline and how to get involved. So we are hosting a number of regional workshops in the Americas, in Europe, in Africa, and Europe, and Asia, and MENA in the coming months, where we will be sharing and doing some capacity building on how to use the tool. So if you are interested in participating in any of those workshops, please do get in touch with me, and we can make sure that you're on the list. We would also encourage you to use the tool. It's available to everyone to assess how your NDC aligns, and then also join our campaign to be bold on buildings. So basically that is a campaign that we launched ahead of COP29, calling on governments to be ambitious, to be bold on buildings when it comes to their NDCs. And that is something, that we want to amplify as we start thinking about COP30. We are recruiting ambassadors from countries, from organizations, from civil society organizations to be part of that campaign. And so there's lots of opportunities to get involved. And I think basically, you know, that's kind of the end. I've tried to keep to 5 minutes. So I think the next slide is really just an invite to join us to Be Bold on Buildings. Please feel free to use this tool. If you'd like to learn more, I'm happy to go a bit deeper. But really grateful that we've been able to build on the excellent work that has been done by others and try to put it into this, hopefully what is a useful, practical tool that many of you will be able to use to do that assessment. So I'll hand back to you now, Anna, and hopefully I've kept us within time.
That was perfect. Thanks a lot, Audrey, and super interesting, the work now. And I mean, I think, as you can see, kind of it's all hands on deck, and yeah, Be Bold on Buildings. Super. So with that, I think now we're opening the floor for our panel. And I would like to ask the panelists to switch on their cameras because we have a very interesting panel here today. So I think really now we're looking into, well, what are the practitioners doing? So where do you stand? What's your experiences? What can you share with our audience? And I think kind of like there's a lot of questions already going on in the chat. I mean, keep going. I think that's exactly what we need. Yeah, and I would ask, so we have Kennedy Mateka from Kenya. We have Asmeri Ashrafi from Bangladesh. We have Ashok Bonam, who works for the Global Green Growth Institute. And we have Danjuma Waniko from Nigeria, one of the early adopters of the scorecard. Wonderful to have you all here. Really great that you're joining our panel. And just, I think, with a view to the time, I think we need to squeeze a tiny little bit. So kind of like, if you keep your interventions like short and crisp, I think we'll have time to go around the panel afterwards. So I think, yeah, so kind of like what we have in our file, I think we'll just squeeze it a little bit, and then I think we'll have a lot of time for discussion. Kennedy, I think I'm going to start with you. I think very important person in the building space. I think Kenya very active also on the Intergovernmental Council for Buildings and Construction, really showing a lot of leadership in this space, which is not always easy. No, I think we all know buildings a bit fragmented sector, and it really needs kind of that drive and that passion to move. And yeah, I would like to ask you about Kenya's NDC. So if you could tell us a little bit, kind of like how buildings are currently reflected, I mean, what you already have. And then also the question of like, yeah, it's nice to have a good NDC, but basically, how do you then move to implementation? I mean, how do you do it in terms of policy? What's maybe any financial mechanisms? And yeah, what good advice do you have for us? Kennedy, floor is yours.
Thank you, Anne. Thank you, everyone, for being here today. I would like to start by first appreciating GlobalABC, Partnership for Energy Efficiency in Buildings, World Green Building Council, together with GIZ for this opportunity. And we don't really take it for granted, but we really appreciate. As you may all be aware, Kenya is a party to the UNFCCC and the Paris Agreement, and that in the year 2020, the country submitted a revised NDC that has a reduction target of up to 32% from what we call the business as usual in our model. And therefore, the NDC emphasizes on several key areas, which include matters relating to energy, infrastructure development, urbanization, and housing. The integration of these areas is very key, especially for us in the building and construction sector, as it plays a significant role in contributing to greenhouse gas emissions and matters relating to climate vulnerability. As a country, we remain committed to achieving our set forth NDC targets, particularly in the area of the built environment. A significant component of these NDCs relates to matters relating to improving the energy efficiency within our building sector. The government intends to implement a new building code with the enforcement date being 1st March this year. and that this code will require adoption of several initiatives, including energy efficiency designs and materials, as well as encouragement of utilization of renewable energy sources. As we commit to improving these energy efficiencies, especially in our public buildings, then regular updating of the building code, together with attendant bylaws and standards, will be key to see that we enhance and deliver an efficient built environment on our end. In this context, we have initiated a process of developing and implementing a green building standard for the country, which has been a collaborative process initiated by the government to deliver an all-inclusive national framework. The NDC has a code number P33, which mandates the enhancement of our enforcement of matters relating to green building codes by both national and our subnationals. In our pursuit to the national standard that aligns with the National Building Code, we're actually inviting each and every one of you here today to support in form of collaboration in achieving this NDC objective. Kenya's NDC emphasizes on several important components, especially relating to matters around climate resilience, infrastructure development in human habitation. And of specific interest in this is that we have been keen to see how best as a country we can involve in designing buildings and urban spaces that are capable of enduring several weather conditions that we do face as a continent. And therefore, integration of green spaces into the urban planning models is very much encouraged to promote the diversity and improve our air quality. And therefore, in our reporting obligation as a country back to Paris Agreement, Article 13 of the agreement mandates member states to submit biannual updates that outlines their progresses towards achieving the NDC. Additionally, if you look at Article 4, paragraph 2 of the Paris Agreement, talks about a mandate or a requirement that each party state must prepare, communicate, and maintain a successive NDC that is intended, that it intends to achieve. The deadline of this submission, as we speak, ladies and gentlemen, was yesterday, Feb 10, 2025, for our country, concerning the new NDC that is set to be implemented within the period starting 1st January 2031 to the end of the year of the 2035. In our submissions, ladies and gentlemen, building and construction sector has identified critical adaptation priorities for that period to ensure that we adapt to risks, vulnerabilities, and impacts of our climate change within our industry. We have actually made deliberate efforts to integrate climate risk information planning and delivery of urban services, while also strengthening our local capacities. This initiative, ladies and gentlemen, is further aligned with our intent to achieve our NDC goal, what we call P34, that require us as a country to conduct climate risks and vulnerability assessments in most of our buildings, projects, and infrastructure developments, especially in areas relating to flooding and sea rise levels, as well as even the NDC goal number P32. The first one was P34, this one is P32, that require us to introduce nature-based solutions in flood control areas, especially around the informal settlement and selected urban areas. There exists an opportunity for all of us here today to come together and see how best we can work together with each and every one of you to embrace this new model of delivering our new NDC. As we submit these updates, the current NDC is said to be effective up to the last day of the year 2030, which is 5 years from now. Building and construction sector in Kenya is increasingly recognized as a component of climate action under the NDC framework. While our 2020 does not explicitly detail matters relating to our sector mitigation targets, there are notable initiatives and frameworks that demonstrate the Kenya's intent to achieving its objectives and obligations under these NDCs. Kenya has been actively participating in both national and even international discussions relating to buildings breakthrough and even ICBC, where we are serving as a vice chair, to advance matters relating to building construction decarbonization agenda. We have engaged in targeted dialogues aimed at achieving zero carbon buildings by the year we hit of the 2030. It is not worth noting, ladies and gentlemen, that our stakeholders are exploring various strategies for decarbonizing our building and construction sector, indicating an increasing knowledge or acknowledgement for our sector's significance in this climate action agenda. In alignment with NDC for the country, we are developing a decarbonization roadmap, specifically tailored towards our building and construction sector. This roadmap, as a policy intervention, will serve as a framework for policy reforms and practical measures necessary for reducing our carbon footprint associated with construction activities. It emphasizes a people-centered approach that incorporates feedbacks from our local stakeholders to ensure they have adequately contributed to the process. In the process of this, I would like to urge that we have extended opportunities, and the government will embrace, and as always continue to embrace, alternative funding models so that the ambitions that we have in our NDCs 2.0 and what we look forward in our 3.0 then is realized. We have funding arrangements relating to PPP, to including various forms of bonds, and we encourage each and every one of you to come forward and see how best we can fill in the gap. I would like to express our sincere gratitude as a country and as a sector to the numerous partners of Kenya who have actually offered guidance and extended support, and to ensure that our building and construction sector remain critical pillar in the national climate action strategies. Within our next 5 years, which is the remaining period for the NDC 2.0, we urge our partners to engage us as we advance our collaborative efforts. We are actively pursuing partnerships and support in the various areas. Finally, one is the issues relating to development and enhancement of our building policies and legislations, with a particular focus on how best we can accelerate climate actions within our sector. Number two is that we'll be keen to see how best we could initiate readiness projects that aim to facilitate our country's integration of resource efficiency measures within our NDCs. And finally, we'll be keen to see how best our partners can come forward and raise further awareness amongst our professionals while strengthening our institutional capacities of the local and international entity, our local and even national entities, as we further seek to mainstream most of our NDC commitments into a national and subnational planning and reporting framework. Thank you, everyone.
Wow, thank you very much, Kennedy. I think this was really like the 360-degree view. I mean, very impressive work. I think there's a few takeaways for me. I think I really was very impressed by the breadth of the activities, because it goes from kind of protecting kind of flood-prone areas to kind of like the roadmap for decarbonization and really kind of like touching housing, etc. I also heard a lot about like effective policies that are very important, and I think like one thing is the NDC, but then the question of like what is basically the consequence, what comes later. And also I have to say, like, very impressed by the long-term work. No, I think it seems like you moved kind of the importance of the building sector from, very, normal beginnings, let's say, to really a different state now. And I heard a bit of like an advertisement for joining your work in the Intergovernmental Council for Buildings and Construction. So I think, country representatives interested in engaging, I think the door is open. Wonderful. So I think we're going around the room. So we're moving from Kenya to Bangladesh. As Mary, I think you are next in our presenters, and I'm really sorry to say that, but we're a bit behind schedule. So I think we need to be fast, but so I'll try to make my question as short as possible. But I would be very keen to hear from you. What policy and financial instruments you found most effective in implementing the NDC in Bangladesh? And where do you feel there's a need for support and in what form? So floor is yours. And I think we still need to unmute you.
Thank you, Anna, and good afternoon, everyone, and a warm greetings from Bangladesh. As you all know, Bangladesh is one of the most climate vulnerable countries in the world, and this is mainly due to its geographical location and low-lying delta landscape. If we see the total area of the country is we have a very small country, but with lots of rivers and water bodies, which actually covering more than 20% of the total areas. And along with that, if you see the most of the country's land is very flat and the average elevation is only 26 feet from sea level. And another challenge is around 92% of the water generated from the Himalayan rivers actually flowing over the territory of the country. So you can imagine how vulnerable the country is, though we are actually emit very little compared to the global contributions, but still we are in the risk of rising sea level, river erosions, extreme weather events like that. So yes, like many other countries, we also have NDCs, and as Jonathan and Kennedy informed in their speeches, that most of the NDCs, like in Bangladesh also, are focused mainly on the energy sector, and the only in Bangladesh we have the same thing, but mainly only they have focused on the two sectors, like how the burn brick emissions can be cut down, and also they have targeted by 2030 the emission must be reduced by 47%, and by prohibiting the fixed chimneys of the brick kilns, and also encouraging the non-burn brick by 2030. And secondly, it has been like also the household and the commercial buildings using the energy efficiency appliances. These are the actually real involvement if we see with the building sector with the NDCs. But Bangladesh government has actually given on that support to achieve the NDC target. We have already stopped the trying to on the process of prohibiting the using the burn brick in the especially in the public buildings construction of public buildings by 2027, and actually, government is taking time. That, as you know, Bangladesh is still developing countries, and there is a huge job market related to big industries. So we're trying to take time to shift the job market to the green market. So government is taking time and hoping by 2027 will be able to restrict the using the burn brick users. And we also Bangladesh government also prepared the building code where it provides the energy efficiency, fire safety, and resilience infrastructure. And we also have that recently we have prepared that energy efficiency conservation master plan. We have renewable energy policy. We have NAP, Delta plan, and so many things. But if we particularly focus on the building sector, recently we have prepared a roadmap for decarbonizing the building and construction sector, as Kenya's friend has informed before. We also have prepared the roadmap, and that roadmap is really highlighting or aiming to reduce the embodied carbon, operational carbon, and adapting new tools and technologies for inclusion and well-being of the community. That is the main aim of the roadmap, and it proposes many key actions for in the strategic level and the spatial planning level, how to deal with the existing and new buildings emissions, and also talks about the supply chain and circularity in circular economy for the building sectors. And as I say that this roadmap is providing the key actions, and we already actually implementing 2 demonstration projects from that roadmap, and we are trying by that demonstration project, we are trying to cope up with the Department of Environment to upgrade the NDCs after 2021. We are on the process of on meetings and discussing issues. So today's discussion and the webinar was very helpful for us to have the guidelines that how the process should go on, and also this all can along with the NDC and accreditation, the action according to the action plan, we are also trying to prepare a certification process, the green building certification process, and identify the what are in the local context, what is the definition of building materials should be like that. That is the thing, and as I told you that Bangladesh government already providing some internal financial support to implement those actions. But still, I like to thank BMZ, the German government, and also European Union and the supporting countries actually who were really supporting us to achieve those kind of action projects so that we can really have a like to accelerate the industry implementation in the near future. Yeah, thank you.
Wonderful, Asmeri, that was really interesting. Again, I think I really picked up a lot of points that came out in your presentation. I think on the one hand, also kind of like pointing out, often we just think about mitigation. And I think really that aspect of adaptation, vulnerability, and how important it is. I also like your link to the job market, because I think that's also a very crucial point. And then I think it became really clear kind of from your presentation that well, these discussions that you need to have to branch out, talk to environment and really see kind of like what fits. And also, yeah, that question of like international collaboration, I think we're sharing here, but I think also kind of like what kind of support is there and how we can mutually help each other move in this like not always easy field. So we have 30 minutes left. So I think our next speaker, Ashok, has the formidable task to still keep some time. And I think I'm going to ask like Asmeri and Kennedy to stay on, because I think I really enjoyed having the four of you. Otherwise, it looks like it's the last man standing. So I think it's really nice to have you here as a panel. Ashok, with lightning speed, a really difficult question. But I think, I mean, as you're working with GGGI, not in one country, but with several ones. So, I mean, question to you would be key challenges for developing Asian countries, how to kind of like improve the NDCs. Yeah, and which tools do you see? What is effective and what can you really share with our audience?
Yeah. Hi, good day, everyone. As introduced myself, Ashok Bonham, representing Global Green Growth Institute. It's a pleasure to be part of this panel discussion along with the distinguished speaker. As we are talking about the contribution of the buildings into the enhanced NDCs, yes, definitely we need to discuss about the challenges and the opportunities and what exactly working on the field. And the major challenge, what we see across the region is the, as you all know, the finance. Because and at the same time across the region we also observe that everyone is aware that with the energy efficiency in the buildings has a major potential for the reduction in the energy emissions, but either it is the retrofitting of the existing buildings or integration of the energy efficient materials into the new construction, a significant capital requirement is there. But somewhat with the several reasons, the developing countries are not able to secure such kind of high level of investments for the capital. That is one of the major reasons we see. And the another challenge is the technical capacity. And many of the cities and regions, we are also seeing that lack of skilled workforce is also needed for the implementation, enforcement, and the scale up of the green building initiatives. Even the policy suggests the weak enforcement. It says that what the impact we need to see that we are not able to see. And the another major challenge we have seen across the regions is the fragmented policies. In many of the countries, we also see that the existing building codes and the energy efficiency standards are either outdated or inconsistently enforced, or in even some cases it is absent completely. Without a clear and well coordinated policy frameworks, it is very much difficult to attract the investments or develop the long-term action plans at the same time to scale up the successful initiatives. And of course, the access to the green finance is also a major hurdle everywhere, because that is due to the stringent like qualification process set by the international funds or lack of financial mechanisms at the country level. This is also a major hurdle we have seen. And here the thing is, like, despite of all these challenges also, we have incredible opportunities. One of the major opportunities is the technology. Now, if we see, we have like very much cost effective and the scalable solutions available for the energy efficient materials, energy management system, and for the low carbon solutions, which can give a major impact. I think even most of the technologies nowadays are even easily accessible, and at the affordable prices also we are able to procure them. So I think we no need to reinvent anything new, just the right policies and incentives need to be there in place so that the acceleration can be increased for the faster adoption. And also the another major challenge is we see the access to the global climate finance. And I think if the governments create the right policy environment, definitely the private investments and the development banks will follow. And this is where the public-private partnerships becomes more essential. I think also I want to highlight the power of the regional cooperation. And if you see, many of the countries already working on improving their building codes and adapting to the international best standards, such as the EDGE, LEED, etc. For example, if you speak about the India, in India already it is striding towards major impact it has created with its energy conservation building codes for the commercial buildings, and also the program policy called Eco-Niwas Samhita for the residential buildings. I think if the similar kind of approach, other countries also align their policies with the international best practices and sharing the learning, I think definitely we can much faster achieve the greener and the sustainable buildings. And of course, we should not forget the capacity building. Whether it is training to the government officials or building manufacturers, technology providers, material manufacturers, ESCOs, financial institutions, entire building ecosystem need to be equipped with the right skills and the knowledge. And also, we have seen that within the building ecosystem, energy professionals, once they understand the long-term cost savings and the benefits of the energy efficiency, definitely they are far more likely to be embraced with the sustainable solutions and the building construction practices. I think now if we talk about the tools, the solution, what we required immediately is like strong enforceable policies should be there in place. Without them, I think voluntary action will not make any sense to achieve our targets. And at the same time, the financial pathways and the mechanisms needs to be there in place to de-risk the private sector investments in the green buildings. And at the same time, the capacity building and awareness creation for the entire building ecosystem needs to be there, so that in their day-to-day lifestyle, they can implement such things. And finally, a real-time monitoring system, data monitoring system need to be there in place to track the progress and at the same time to make the informed decisions. And at the end, as we are talking about the NDCs more ambitious for the building, it is not about only the climate action, but also it is also creating the economic opportunities. And what green building is saying, that the green building is the lower the energy costs, and it is also creating the employment in the new industries. And at the same time, it is making cities more resilient to the climate action. I think with the right mix of the policies, technology, and the finances, we can see the impact. With this, I can conclude my remarks. I think you want to say the same thing, I think.
That was perfect. Thanks a lot, Ashok.
I can continue, but I think due to time constraint, I'm stopping here.
No, and I'm my moderator heart bleeds because I feel like we would have so many follow-up questions. And I think there's also like a very good discussion in the chat. So thanks a lot for pointing out, especially like the points about policy and finance. No, I think and really the question of how to unlock investment. I think this is like our homework for continuing these discussions and continuing the work, especially because now, so Nigeria will have the last word, or the almost last word. Danjuma, we have 5 minutes left, and I think a lot of people will leave us then. But you are the president of the Nigeria Green Building Council and an early adopter of the scorecard, if I can say so. And we would love to hear from you, basically kind of like your first experiences. I know also like our colleagues participated in the workshop. Yeah, how do you see? How can it help? How do you use it? Yeah, what actions do you think need to happen in a very local context to actually move on the NDCs and on implementation? And yeah, I would say 5 minutes, and then we slowly wrap up. Floor is yours.
Okay. Thank you so much, and thank you for having me here today. I'm going to try and do 2 minutes.
Oh, and Danjuma, I hope it's different. Maybe it's me,
yeah.
But we do have a bit of a connection issue. So maybe we'll try without the video.
Without the video, okay.
So we can hear you well.
Is it better now?
Now I can hear you perfectly. Thanks.
Perfect. All right. I'll skip most of what I wanted to say because it's not our experience is not dissimilar from what we have heard from others. In the sense of the lack of comprehensive treatment of buildings in the NDCs. And I just want to try and layer a bit on what Audrey said about the scorecard. I won't talk too much about the process. Well, as you said, we are adopters. We ran a series of workshops and did some subnational mapping, consulted stakeholders, quite a large exercise, and to get insights on our NDC and our national and subnational policy context. We found a lot of interesting things which I will to. The only thing I think I haven't really heard here, or perhaps I missed it, was the disconnect we found between our NDC climate commitments and our national and subnational policy frameworks. The challenge we found was that most of the national subnational policy NDCs, and they hadn't been updated. So that was a bit of a surprise for us, and that was something I think was interesting. The scorecard exercise that out. I think it's important for me to say here, as an advertisement for the scorecard, that I think one of the ways it's so powerful as a tool is it's not, and I think this was also mentioned earlier about expert-driven work and expert-driven assignment. It's not, and it's designed as a top-down, bottom-up tool. It engages a broad coalition of stakeholders, brings them together into the room, and you work together to co-create solutions to identify, to address the gaps that you've identified. This is important because it ensures that all the people that will be ultimately involved in implementing the actions are part of creating the solutions. And so they are all on board and they all know what to do. So I think that is one of the most important and most powerful aspects of this NDC scorecard. And it's interesting, that's one of the things we found. We had with us our National Commission of Climate Change. So we believe that, fingers crossed, they'll take some of the insights and plug them into the NDC update. But we also had with us subnational policy, subnational governments, industry, civil society, academia, the people who will actually be involved in taking the NDC update and translating it into acts on the ground. So that, I think, was one of the important lessons. And I think that was one of the most useful aspects of the NDC scorecard. I'll stop there so that we have time for a few questions. Thank you.
Super, that was really lightning speed. So we are at the official end of our time, unfortunately. So I think we had a lot of discussions in the chat. So I think that's really good. And I think people also left their context to be able to respond. I think we will not manage to really do a proper round of questions. We have a second session of our webinar on Thursday for the people who are afternoon time zones, so to speak. And so I think we'll just slowly need to wrap up. I would like to ask our panel if you could switch on your cameras again. So, I mean, our panel and all the presenters, because I think we had like a really a very wide range of presentations and insights from you. And I think, like, first of all, a very big thank you to all of you. I think we all know this is really, I mean, 2025. So it's kind of like the last stretch for the NDCs. And I think, yeah, many people are working on how to position the building sector in this. What I take away from this discussion was, of course, well, it doesn't stop there. I think it's wonderful to have really good policy measures, or yeah, really good like sectors firmly positioned in the NDC, but that's actually when all the work starts. No, so I really, what I heard from you, I mean, there's really the whole question about like the policies, yeah, how to work on the policy framework and how to align that. Finance, really key. No, I mean, in the end, it should be more than a piece of paper, our wonderful NDC, but the question of like, what happens then? I think Danjuma just in the end really brought up that question of, well, basically stakeholder engagement, bring everyone together, aligning so that it's really like, kind of, it's a very multi-directional process. And yeah, so I think, very big thank you also for bringing out that question of breadth. Also, I think it came up in the guide, it came up in the scorecard that really, I mean, it's not one sector. It's like, it's a multifaceted point. We need to look at kind of adaptation, mitigation, like the point of building materials was also like raised from Asmeri. And then even the wider issues around jobs, etc. So yeah, a very, very big chunk of work. And what I really heard from you was, yeah, kind of like that call for international collaboration. I think part of that is basically what we all try to do today, basically give an insight into our work that we have on our respective ends. Also, I think, and we're all working towards this, like mobilizing resources for supporting that kind of work, because it's very important, and it doesn't just happen by itself. Just in terms of like, let's say, follow-up, I would say, I mean, we've heard about like many initiatives kind of going forward. I mean, I can just like talk about our little corner. So PEEB is working with 11 countries under the PEEB program at the moment. We're defining activities. And I think there will be a few countries where we will work on NDCs. GlobalABC will also work with a few countries to kind of support in this crucial time up to the final deadline to support the NDCs. I mean, I think we heard from the World Green Building Council and the Green Building Councils about the work on the scorecard project. And I think there were already like, there was a high discussion in the chat about like, how can we get in touch regarding the workshops? And I hope you all have the right email addresses that you need. We will definitely discuss it at the next General Assembly of the GlobalABC. And I think, yeah, we all need to see kind of like how to really share that practice. I hope like the guide really kind of shows the breadth and gives pointers. And in the end, it's work that needs to happen at the country level, that needs to be well adjusted to what is needed in the countries. And yeah, and we can all learn from each other in that respect. And so a very big thank you to the panel, to the presenters, but also for the really excellent questions in the chat. On Thursday, we'll have more time for the questions, I promise. Yeah, but for today, a big thank you. Keep it up, and yeah, we're very curious to see kind of what we end up with in the NDCs in 2025, and then the real work starts. Thank you very much. Have a great rest of the day, morning, afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.